So the Dodge 5.2 and 5.9 have a pretty bad design flaw in the Magnum motors, the gas 5.9, that is, not the diesel 5.9. And so I'm going to show you really quick what that is and how you fix it, and do it for pretty cheap. But this right here is a steel plate that goes on the bottom of the 5.9 and 5.2 intake manifold. The manifold is aluminum, the plate's steel. If you know anything about metallurgy, steel and aluminum, when they heat and cool, they expand and contract at different rates. So they put a gasket between this. Well, that only works for half the life of the vehicle. You got to replace that gasket every 5-10 years, and it's a real pain in the butt. So the proper solution is to replace it with aluminum. Now, there's people out there who make these and sell them, and it's about $100 for the kit. That includes gaskets. The gaskets are only about $15 a piece. So I'm going to show you how to take a $20 chunk of aluminum and make it worth $100. Stay
As I lay here deep inside my thoughts, how you speak to me and treat me wrong. When will it end? There's so much.
So, final step is to cut out the rough outer profile of this thing. You don't need to be perfect. Like, if you look right there, you can see how it kind of sticks out past the edge just a little bit. That doesn't matter. There's nothing there. There's nothing there that's in the way. What does matter is where it sticks out a lot. Over here on the corners and over on this edge, it can't be sticking out that far. Now you can use a hacksaw, a portaband, a bandsaw, whatever. I happen to have a bandsaw at work, so I'm going to take this into work and I'm going to bandsaw it. And then you just need to deburr the holes. See if I can find it there. You just need to run a countersink very, very lightly by hand over those to knock off any burrs. The first few holes I did, the ones where the screws are, I just clamp the two pieces together with 2 C-clamps. That's all you got to do. And then you could use a hand drill. I used a drill press because that's what I've got, but if you had a hand drill, you could do it just fine. And I think it's a 17/64 drill bit that you use, and that fits perfectly into the old holes. This stuff's not rocket science, guys. Anybody could do this. Anybody with a few mechanic tools could do this, and a little bit of mechanic skill could do this. It's not, you don't have to be a machinist, you don't have to be a genius, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, rocket surgeon, whatever. You don't gotta, it's not that hard. But again, this is 1/4 inch. This is what the professional companies sell to do this. It's 1/4 inch plate. 1/4 inch by 7 is what I used, but you can use any aluminum. It doesn't need to be 1/4 inch, but that's just what the guys sell. The Hughes Performance sells is 1/4 inch. The next one I'm going to use, I'll probably use 3/16, but you know, it's just what I got laying around. But I can get it scrapyard cheap sometimes, whatever. But this one I paid a premium because it's exactly the size I wanted to start with, and it was $20, and it's worth $100 now. So there you go. The second problem with the 5.2 and 5.9 motors, the Magnum Dodge motors, is the runners. Now, this is the underneath side of the intake manifold. This is what that plate is going to cover. Alright, that steel plate covers it from the factory and wears the gaskets out frequently-ish. And the aluminum plate's what I'm going to be putting on here. If you look how long those runners are compared to like a 4-barrel manifold. These runners are huge. Okay, so this is all plenum. This whole void in here is all the plenum area, which is good. A large plenum isn't a bad thing, but the runners themselves, look at this, it starts here and it wraps all the way around to there. The runner's like 2 foot long, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for torque. Okay, if all you're going for is torque, long runner's fine. It's okay. But if you want to ever so slightly increase the horsepower and increase the peak horsepower, then what you want to do with a 5.9, so you come in here and you can see where this is angled. That's those runners. That's where they're angled at right here. If it's a 5.9, you cut these runners off right there and then smooth them out and just give them a little bit of a bowl, little curvature feeding into it. So I'm going to do that next. You do them to all 8 of them. If you're running a 5.2 and you want to get just a little bit more power out of it while you got these apart, you cut off about half of this. So you come down about, you've got an inch and a half almost right here for height this way. So you come down about half of that. You come down maybe a little bit more than half an inch down on the tall side of it, the side that has lots of extra. Come down about halfway and chop it off if you have a 5.2. And then same thing, you take a file or a rotary burr and you kind of bowl the entrance to it so it has a nice smooth entrance. You can also go through these and do a lot of porting work to them, but it doesn't gain you much because you don't have a lot to work with, and you can only go about halfway. You can't go all the way around that corner. So like I said, it starts here, wraps all the way around and makes a complete horseshoe shape and comes out over here. So in there, out there, this is where the cylinder head is. This is upside down, obviously. So you can't really port all the way around with these. It's just impossible. You don't have a tool that can go all the way around a corner. But you can go in and you can kind of just clean up the casting roughness. It's just a sand cast piece. So you can kind of just clean up that rough texture a little bit on the entrance side of it. You can do the same thing on the exit side, the side that the injectors are on, but there's not a whole lot to do to it. It's so dark and dingy in here, especially with all that carbon in there, but it's fairly smooth, really. I mean, compared to some other ones, it has a fairly smooth port. You could come in and you could gasket match it if you were doing that, but if you're not going to gasket match the manifold, not the manifold, but the heads, you're not hardly going to gain anything there. So just, you can go in and just clean it up a little bit, just barely, but there's not a whole lot to do to it. So, but compared to where like the injectors are, it's a pretty smooth transition, really. There's not a whole lot there to mess with. So, but the runner length is way more than it needs. It increases your RPM range, where your peak torque is, just up just a hair, not a lot, just a hair. So, but while you got it apart, and if you got a spare one, which is what I did, I went ahead and got a spare one from a buddy who'd already done the job. He went and got one from the junkyard to swap his, and gave me the extra one that came off his truck. So I can go ahead and work on the manifold while I'm still driving the truck, and then I can just swap manifolds when the time comes, so when I have some downtime. Anyway, so hope you like that.